You wake each morning with a weight you cannot name. The light creeps through the curtains, but it does not feel like light, only a pale imitation of something you once knew. You move through the rituals of your day with a strange detachment, as if you were watching yourself from the corner of the room, as if life is happening to someone else entirely. And deep within, a voice you've tried to silence keeps whispering, "Is this all there is?" No one ever warned you that emptiness can feel heavier than sorrow, that numbness itself can be a kind of agony, not loud or dramatic, but dull and relentless, like a question that will not go away. You chase distractions, scroll endlessly, drown yourself in work or noise, hoping that somewhere in all this movement you'll find the meaning that slipped quietly from your hands. Yet the more you run from the void, the more it follows you, as if it were not a void at all, but a living presence, watching and waiting. What if this hollowness isn't a defect to be cured, but a message to be heard? What if your suffering isn't a malfunction, but an initiation, the first step in a deeper unfolding? Carl Gustav Jung believed that the human psyche is not trying to torment you, but to awaken you, that the anxiety, the boredom, the subtle discontent pulsing beneath the surface are not enemies but messengers, guiding you toward the parts of yourself you abandoned long ago. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, not who the world told you to be. But this path is not gentle. It demands that you descend into the underworld of your own mind, that you face the shadow you've denied, the wounds you've buried, the archetypes that live beneath your conscious self. It is a journey that begins not in triumph, but in confusion, not in clarity, but in collapse. And if you are listening to this now, it may be because your own collapse has already begun. This is not depression. This is not failure. This is the psyche calling you back to yourself. If this journey speaks to something deep within you, if you sense that there is more to your mind, more to your story, more to you, then stay with this exploration. Like and share this video if it resonates, and subscribe so you don't lose the thread of this unfolding. The deeper we go, the more the psyche reveals. And what waits beyond this descent is nothing less than your own wholeness. You cannot begin a journey without a map. And Jungian psychology offers one of the most profound maps of the human soul ever drawn. Unlike Freud, who saw the mind primarily as a battleground of repressed desires, Jung envisioned the psyche as a vast inner cosmos, layered, living, and purposeful. At the surface of this cosmos lies the ego, the familiar I that speaks in your head, that navigates the world, that believes it is in charge. But the ego is only a thin film on the surface of a deep sea. Beneath it lies the personal unconscious, the forgotten memories, the dismissed impulses, the disowned traits you've pushed out of awareness. And beneath even that, deeper and older than your personal story, lies the collective unconscious, the shared psychic inheritance of humanity, a realm of primordial patterns Jung called archetypes. The ego imagines itself as the center of the mind, but Jung insisted it is not. It is merely a point of reference in a far larger field. And this field, this totality of conscious and unconscious, he called the self. The self is not the ego. It is the whole of you, known and unknown, visible and hidden, wounded and divine. It is the seed of your potential, the guiding principle of your growth, and the silent intelligence that orchestrates your becoming. You are not merely a conscious mind trying to manage a chaotic unconscious. You are a self trying to remember itself through the dance of consciousness and shadow, of ego and archetype. But here's the paradox. The ego resists this truth. It clings to its illusions of control, terrified of what it cannot name. It builds identities, roles, and narratives. I am this kind of person, I am not that, and defends them with everything it has. Yet life, in its ruthless wisdom, will not let you stay small. Cracks appear in the mask. Strange dreams visit you in the night. Repressed feelings leak through your careful composure. You encounter people who trigger irrational reactions you can't explain. And in those moments, the unconscious begins to speak. Jung called these eruptions complexes, autonomous clusters of emotion, memory, and instinct that operate beneath awareness. You think you are choosing freely, but a complex is choosing through you. You believe your anger is about the present, but it is your abandoned child self screaming from the past. You imagine you have fallen in love with a person, but it is an archetype, the anima or animus, that has seized your heart. These complexes are not enemies. They are fragments of the self-seeking reintegration. They pull you into repetition and suffering not to punish you, but to draw your attention to what is unfinished. Consider the moments you felt most irrational, the jealousy that seemed to come from nowhere, the disproportionate rage, the inexplicable fear. In those eruptions, the unconscious is breaking through the ego's defenses, saying, "Look here." Something in you remains unresolved. Jung believed that healing does not happen by suppressing these forces, but by entering into dialogue with them, by bringing them into the light of consciousness and understanding their purpose. This is the work of Jungian therapy, to make the unconscious conscious, to descend into the dark and return with gold. It is not about erasing your pain, but transforming your relationship with it. It is not about building a stronger ego, but about aligning the ego with the self, so that your conscious life becomes a vessel for your deeper unfolding. But this descent has a gatekeeper, and it is the part of you you least want to meet. Jung called it the shadow, the sum of all you have denied, rejected, or exiled within yourself. Every time you said, "That's not me," every time you disowned a desire, every time you buried a truth to stay loved or accepted, you added another piece to your shadow. It follows you silently, shaping your choices and distorting your perceptions, projected onto others as judgment or attraction or hatred. You despise arrogance in someone else because you fear your own. You're drawn to another's courage because it is the courage you've buried. The shadow is both your enemy and your teacher, the wound and the key to your wholeness. To meet the shadow is to shatter the illusion that you are only the light. It is to discover that your capacity for cruelty mirrors your capacity for compassion, that your deepest wounds conceal your greatest gifts. This confrontation is not comfortable. It is not meant to be, but it is the threshold every seeker must cross. And so, the map of the psyche is not just a theory. It is a summons. It is the beginning of a journey that will demand everything from you: your honesty, your courage, your willingness to be undone. Because to become whole, you must first break the shell of who you think you are, and once the cracks begin to form, something else stirs beneath the surface, something ancient, archetypal, and alive. You spend your life constructing a story about yourself, a story of goodness, competence, strength, and virtue. You shape it carefully, brick by brick, pruning away the impulses that do not fit, burying the memories that don't align, disguising the fears that would ruin the image. This story becomes your identity, and you wear it like armor. But no armor is without weight. And one day you realize that the very thing meant to protect you has become a cage. The shadow lives in the places you swore you'd never go. It is the envy you hide beneath a smile, the rage you disguise as righteousness, the hunger you label as shame. It is the forgotten dream you deemed impractical, the part of you that longs to speak but remains silent. You exile these parts not because they are evil, but because they threaten the fragile story of who you believe you are. And so, they retreat into the dark, unclaimed, unseen, festering in silence. But what is buried does not die. It grows roots, it gains strength, and sooner or later, it will demand your attention. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That is the essence of shadow work. It is not the pursuit of purity, but the integration of totality. It is the recognition that wholeness is not found in rejecting the dark, but in embracing it as part of yourself. Every shadow carries a sacred wound, an old story of rejection, humiliation, fear, or betrayal. That wound is not a sign of weakness. It is the birthplace of your depth. Imagine the child who was told their anger was dangerous. They learn to swallow their fury, to smile through their pain, to become good. But beneath the surface, that anger festers, warping into resentment, leaking into relationships, shaping the architecture of their choices. It appears as depression, as passivity, as a quiet self-betrayal. Only when they face that exiled anger, when they feel it fully, name it honestly, and understand its origins, can they reclaim its power. Anger, once integrated, becomes boundary. It becomes protection. It becomes the fire that fuels change, or the one who is mocked for dreaming too boldly. They bury their vision deep, convincing themselves they are content with less. Yet they feel a haunting restlessness, an ache that nothing seems to soothe. That ache is the call of the buried dream, and until it is acknowledged, they will wander through life half asleep, haunted by what could have been. Shadow work is not about indulging these buried parts blindly. It is about understanding them. Every dark impulse is a distorted attempt to meet a deeper need. Every sabotaging behavior carries a forgotten story. The task is to listen, to descend into the labyrinth of your psyche and follow the thread back to its source. This descent is the work of therapy, of dream work, of active imagination. It is the slow, deliberate turning toward what you've spent a lifetime running from. But beware, the shadow does not reveal itself easily. It hides behind projection, cloaking itself in the faces of others. You see in others what you cannot bear to see in yourself. The arrogance that disgusts you is your own buried pride. The vulnerability you mock is your own repressed softness. The qualities you idolize are the unclaimed strengths you deny. This is why relationships are the crucibles of transformation, because through others, your shadow speaks. And yet, the shadow is not only personal. Beneath the layer of individual wounds lies the archetypal shadow, the collective darkness humanity has exiled. It is the predator, the tyrant, the destroyer, the trickster. These forces live in each of us, regardless of how civilized or virtuous we imagine ourselves to be. To confront them is to acknowledge your kinship with all of humanity, the monstrous and the divine alike. It is to say, I am not separate. I, too, am capable of cruelty. I, too, contain the capacity for evil. Only from this place of radical honesty can real morality emerge. It is a terrifying realization, and yet it is liberating, because what is faced consciously no longer controls you from the dark. There is a strange alchemy in this process. As you integrate what you once rejected, your sense of self expands. You become less reactive, less defensive, less dependent on masks. The parts that once sabotaged you now serve you. Rage becomes righteous courage. Envy becomes inspiration. Fear becomes wisdom. The energy once trapped in repression becomes fuel for creation. This is the gold Jung spoke of, the hidden treasure buried in the depths of the shadow. But this gold is not given freely. It must be earned. And the price is your comfort, your certainty, your old identity. You must be willing to question everything you believe about yourself. You must let the old story die so that something larger can be born. This death is not metaphorical. It is psychological dismemberment. It is the ego's unraveling before the vastness of the self. Many who begin shadow work mistake this stage for failure. They feel lost, fragmented, disoriented. They say, "I thought I was healing, but I feel worse." But this disintegration is not regression, it is initiation. It is the sacred wound opening to the light. Jung called this state enantiodromia, the tendency of things to become their opposite. When pushed to the extreme, the false self collapses under its own weight, and in the ruins, the seeds of the true self begin to sprout. The descent is necessary. The darkness is not a detour. It is the path itself. And so, shadow work is not a technique. It is a way of being. It is the willingness to look unflinchingly at what you are, to stand in the fire of your own contradictions, and to trust that wholeness lies on the other side. It is the courage to say, "Yes, I am capable of cruelty. Yes, I have betrayed myself. Yes, I have hidden from love." And it is the grace to say, "And still I am worthy. And still I am becoming." When you make peace with the shadow, something shifts. Life stops being a war against yourself. The tension between who you are and who you pretend to be begins to dissolve. And in that space, a new kind of freedom emerges. Not the freedom of escape, but the freedom of authenticity. Yet, the shadow is only one gate on this journey. Beyond it lies something even more profound, the world of archetypes, the ancient patterns that shape your desires, your fears, and your destiny. They are the gods behind your thoughts, the myths beneath your choices. And until you meet them, you will never truly know who you are. If the shadow is the buried personal truth, then the archetype is the deep river beneath the bedrock, ancient, impersonal, eternal. Archetypes are not ideas you invent. They are patterns that invent you. They are the primordial forms that have lived in the human psyche for millennia, shaping our myths, our dreams, our fears, and our longing. They are the gods we think we no longer believe in, still whispering through the architecture of our minds. Jung called the collective unconscious the psychic inheritance of humanity. Just as your body carries the imprint of evolution, the heartbeat of your ancestors, the reflexes of survival honed over eons, your psyche carries the imprint of timeless psychological patterns. These patterns are not abstract concepts. They are living forces. They appear in myths as gods and monsters, in fairy tales as heroes and witches, in dreams as strangers and lovers. They speak in images, symbols, and emotions. And whether you acknowledge them or not, they move through you like invisible hands, shaping your fate. Consider the mother archetype, not your personal mother, but the primordial mother that has existed in every culture since the dawn of humanity. She is nurturing and devouring, gentle and terrifying, creator and destroyer. She is Demeter and Kali, Mary, and Tiamat. In your psyche, she may manifest as the instinct to protect and nourish, or as the suffocating force that clings and consumes. If you reject her, she may appear in projection, in the lover you idolize, or the figure you resent. But she is always there, shaping how you relate to care, dependency, and creation. Or the hero, the archetype of courage, sacrifice, and transformation. The hero slays dragons not because the dragon is evil, but because the act of facing it transforms him. You feel the hero stirring when you defy your fear, when you leave the known for the unknown, when you suffer for a purpose larger than yourself. But the hero, too, has a shadow. He can become the tyrant, the savior who imposes his will on others, the conqueror who forgets the humanity of those he seeks to liberate. There is the trickster, chaotic and subversive, breaking rules to reveal deeper truths. There is the wise old man, bearer of knowledge and guidance, and his shadow, the dogmatic priest who clings to stale certainties. There is the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine that shape your love, creativity, and soul. There is the self, not an archetype among others, but the organizing principle that draws them all into wholeness. These archetypes are not outside you. They live within you. They shape your dreams, animate your fantasies, and orchestrate your relationships. They appear in the stories you tell about yourself, the roles you gravitate toward, the people you are inexplicably drawn to or repelled by. And when you deny them, they manifest as fate. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Archetypes are the deep currents beneath the surface of your choices. They pull you towards certain patterns, repeat the same dramas with different faces, whisper the same desires in new disguises. If you do not know them, you mistake their voices for your own. You think you chose that lover, but it was your anima seeking integration. You think you sought that career, but it was the hero's quest playing out through you. You think you hate that person, but it is your shadow reflected in their eyes. To work with archetypes is not to control them. You cannot control a tidal wave, but to enter into dialogue with them. This dialogue happens most vividly in dreams, where the unconscious speaks in its native tongue, symbol, and story. A woman appears in your dream, radiant and distant. She is not merely a person. She is the anima, calling you to integrate your inner feminine. A monstrous figure chases you through a labyrinth. That is not just fear. It is the dragon of transformation demanding to be faced. A wise old man offers you a key. That is not just a dream character. It is the self offering guidance from beyond the ego's reach. Active imagination, a technique Jung developed, invites you to deepen this dialogue. You enter a meditative state, allow an image from your unconscious to arise, and engage with it as if it were real, because psychologically it is real. You speak to the figure, ask it questions, listen to its answers. Through this conversation, unconscious contents become conscious, archetypal energies find expression, and the ego begins to form a relationship with the deeper psyche. But this relationship is not without danger. Archetypes are vast. They carry the weight of centuries, the energy of gods. If the ego identifies with them, inflation occurs, a dangerous swelling of the self-image. The person who identifies with the hero may become grandiose, believing themselves destined to save the world. The one possessed by the wise old man may speak with absolute certainty, deaf to any challenge. The lover possessed by the anima may drown in obsession, mistaking projection for truth. Jung warned that the ego must maintain humility before the archetypes to engage with them without being consumed by them. This balance between conscious dialogue and unconscious depth is at the heart of individuation. Individuation is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. It is the lifelong process of integrating all the parts of yourself, shadow and light, personal and archetypal, human and divine, into a harmonious whole. It is the unfolding of the self through the vehicle of your life. And the self will use everything to move you toward that unfolding. It will use your suffering and your joy, your failures and your triumphs, your relationships and your solitude. It will even use your resistance. For individuation is not a linear path. It is a spiral, a dance of opposites. You will face the same patterns again and again, each time at a deeper level. You will descend and rise, die and be reborn, lose yourself and find yourself anew. The self does not rush. It is patient, ancient, inevitable. This process can feel bewildering. You may feel torn between contradictions, between independence and intimacy, chaos and order, strength and vulnerability. Jung called this temporal tension, the pull between opposing forces that must be held rather than resolved. To hold a tension is to allow something new to emerge. When you refuse one side, you stagnate. When you hold both, you transform. Archetypes teach you this dance. They show you that you are not one thing but many, not static but fluid. They reveal that the villain and the saint live within the same soul, that creation and destruction are twins, that the lover and the warrior are not enemies but complements. Through them, you come to know the vastness of what you are. And yet, the archetypes are not the destination. They are guides, thresholds, initiations. Beyond them lies something even deeper, something that cannot be named or contained. It is the self itself, the organizing intelligence behind your becoming. It is the center and the circumference, the origin and the destiny. It is what calls you beyond your story, beyond your persona, beyond even your shadow. To approach the self is to approach the sacred. And that is where the path now leads, into the realm of the soul, where psychology and spirituality become one. You were never meant to remain who you were at 17, or 27, or even 70. Every cell in your body testifies to this truth, constantly dying and renewing, never static, always becoming. The psyche is no different. It too is alive, unfolding, evolving, and its deepest impulse, Jung believed, is toward wholeness. This is the process he called individuation, not individualism, not egoic self, but the gradual unfolding of the total self through the vessel of your conscious life. Individuation is not about adding something foreign to you. It is about becoming what you always were but did not yet know. It is the acorn growing into the oak, the caterpillar dissolving into the butterfly, the coal transforming into the diamond. The blueprint is already within you. The self is not a destination you must reach. It is the seed already planted in the soil of your being. But like any seed, it requires conditions to unfold. It must push through the darkness of the earth. It must endure the storms. It must risk breaking apart. Only then can it reach the light. The journey begins, paradoxically, with breakdown. The structures of your old self begin to crack. The roles you once inhabited feel hollow. The values you inherited from others lose their grip. The dreams you chased no longer satisfy. This dissolution is not failure. It is the psyche clearing space for something new. Jung called this state sacred paralysis, the stillness before rebirth, the pause between death and emergence. It is the winter of the soul, when nothing seems to grow but everything is preparing beneath the surface. Most people flee this winter. They numb themselves with distraction, cling to old identities, or frantically construct new ones. But if you can stay, if you can endure the silence without rushing to fill it, something extraordinary happens. The deeper psyche begins to speak. Dreams intensify. Symbols surface. Long-buried desires stir awake. And slowly, a new pattern begins to take shape, not imposed by the ego, but arising from the depths. This emergence often comes in fragments. A dream that lingers, a sudden longing you cannot explain, a fascination with something you never cared about before. These are not random. They are the self guiding you breadcrumb by breadcrumb toward what you are meant to become. Jung advised paying attention to these subtle signals, to follow the thread of what stirs your soul, even if it seems irrational. Individuation is not a path the ego can chart. It is a mystery that unfolds through listening. But listening is not passive. It requires discernment, courage, and action. The psyche will present you with tasks, opportunities to embody the unconscious content that seeks expression. Perhaps you must set a boundary where you once submitted. Perhaps you must forgive where you once hated. Perhaps you must create something even if it terrifies you. Each of these acts weaves unconscious material into consciousness, expanding your sense of self. Each integration brings you closer to the totality you were meant to embody. Yet, individuation is not only about expansion. It is also about sacrifice. Parts of you will not survive this journey. Old defenses must be dismantled. Comfortable illusions must be surrendered. False identities must be shed. The ego, which once believed itself the ruler of the psyche, must learn humility before the self. This surrender is not annihilation. It is transformation. The caterpillar does not die in the chrysalis, it dissolves, so that the butterfly can emerge. The psyche often orchestrates this dissolution through what Jung called the provisional life, a phase in which you live according to an outdated script. Everything appears fine from the outside, yet inside you feel empty, restless, disconnected. You might achieve success and feel nothing. You might follow the path you were told would make you happy, only to find yourself haunted by a sense of futility. This disillusionment is not a mistake. It is the self withdrawing its energy from the false life, compelling you to seek the real one. And the real one is not something you invent. It is something you discover. It is not a life constructed from shoulds, but one that arises from your deepest nature. Individuation calls you to align your outer life with your inner truth, to make your relationships, work, and choices reflect the totality of who you are. This does not mean a life free from struggle. On the contrary, it often means more struggle, but struggle that feels meaningful, suffering that serves growth, conflict that births wisdom. This path is not linear. It spirals through the same themes again and again, each time at a deeper level. Just when you think you have integrated your shadow, a new layer emerges. Just when you think you understand your anima, she changes form. Just when you think you know yourself, the self reveals a deeper mystery. This is the nature of living psyche, never finished, always unfolding. Individuation is not a goal you achieve, but a relationship you sustain. And in this relationship, paradox reigns. You must become yourself, yet you must also transcend yourself. You must embrace your individuality, yet you must recognize your unity with the whole. You must hold your humanity and your divinity, your darkness and your light, your joy and your sorrow. The self is not one side or the other. It is the union of opposites. Jung called this union the conjunctio oppositorum, the sacred marriage of contradictions. And it is in this union that new consciousness is born. The symbols of this union appear everywhere, in myths of dying and rising gods, in alchemical texts describing the marriage of sun and moon, in dreams where enemies embrace or lovers merge. These are not mere stories. They are the psyche's way of pointing toward wholeness. They remind you that you are not meant to eliminate your contradictions, but to hold them in creative tension until something new emerges. This something new is not predictable. It is not under the ego's control. It arises from the self, and when it does, it often feels as if it comes from beyond you. Jung described this as a kind of grace, not religious in the dogmatic sense, but as the mysterious movement of the psyche toward greater wholeness. You cannot force it. You can only prepare the ground through honesty, through courage, through devotion to the truth, and wait. And yet, even as you approach this deeper center, the journey is far from over. Individuation is not a one-time awakening, but a lifelong unfolding. Each stage brings new challenges, new descents, new resurrections. The deeper you go, the more subtle the work becomes. And beyond even this, beyond the shadow and the archetypes, beyond the ego's surrender and the union of opposites, lies a mystery Jung only hinted at. The sacred dimension of the psyche itself. For Jung, psychology and spirituality were never separate. The self is not merely psychological. It is also numinous. It is the image of God within the soul, the spark of the divine seeking realization through your finite life. And as you draw closer to it, you begin to sense that individuation is not only about becoming yourself, it is also about becoming a vessel for something far larger. This is where the path turns from therapy into transformation, from self-knowledge into soul-making. This is where the psychological becomes sacred, and it is here, at the threshold of the self, that the deepest paradox awaits. The realization that the one you have been seeking all along is not someone else, not a teacher, not a savior, not even the future version of yourself, but the one who has been seeking. There comes a point on the path where words begin to fail. Psychology can describe the structures of the psyche, name the archetypes, map the shadow, and outline the process of individuation. But beyond all that, there is a silence that no theory can fill. It is the silence of the sacred, the ineffable presence that Jung called the numinous. And if you have walked far enough into yourself, if you have descended into your shadow, wrestled with your complexes, spoken with your archetypes, and surrendered your ego, you will eventually find yourself standing before it. The self is not merely a psychological construct. It is the living center of your being, the axis around which the psyche revolves. It is both who you are and who you are becoming. It is the seed and the fruit, the origin and the destination. And yet, it is also more than you, larger, deeper, older. Jung often described encounters with the self as encounters with God. Not because he meant God in a dogmatic or theological sense, but because the experience carries the same weight, the same awe, the same sense of being in the presence of something both intimate and infinite. When the self begins to emerge into consciousness, it does not arrive as an idea. It arrives as an experience, a profound sense of meaning that cannot be explained. A synchronicity that feels too precise to be chance. A dream that shakes you to your core. A sudden awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. It is as if the veil between inner and outer dissolves, and you glimpse the deeper order beneath the chaos. Life ceases to feel random. Even your suffering begins to reveal a strange intelligence, as though it were guiding you toward something essential. Jung believed that the psyche is inherently purposive, that it moves you toward wholeness whether you are aware of it or not. Your neuroses, your crises, your longings, your losses, all of them are part of a larger design. Even the obstacles you curse are often the self trying to redirect you. The job you lose that forces you to discover your real vocation. The heartbreak that cracks you open to love more deeply. The illness that compels you to live more authentically. From the ego's perspective, these are disasters. From the self's perspective, they are catalysts. But to see them this way, you must shift your orientation. The ego is obsessed with control, with certainty, with comfort. The self invites surrender, not passive resignation, but active trust in the deeper intelligence moving through your life. It asks you to relinquish the illusion that you are the architect of your destiny and to become instead a collaborator with something larger. It asks you to listen, to follow the subtle threads of meaning, to let life shape you as much as you shape it. This surrender is not easy. It often feels like death, because, in a sense, it is. The small self, the ego identity you have clung to, cannot survive this encounter intact. It must bow before the mystery, and in bowing it is transformed. What emerges is not the annihilation of individuality, but its transfiguration. You remain you, but you are no longer only you. You become a vessel through which the self expresses itself. Your life ceases to be merely personal and becomes archetypal, symbolic, sacred. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation as a religious process. He did not mean religion in the institutional sense, but in its original meaning, religorate, to bind back, to reconnect. Individuation reconnects you to the depths of your own soul and, through that, to the depths of existence itself. It reveals that the psyche and the cosmos are not separate realms, but reflections of one another. The patterns that shape your inner life are the same patterns that shape the stars. The archetypes that govern your dreams are the same forces that govern myth and history. You are not a solitary fragment adrift in a meaningless universe. You are a thread in a vast and living tapestry. This realization does not remove suffering, but it transforms its context. Suffering ceases to be meaningless torment and becomes initiation. Your wounds become sacred teachers. Your losses become portals to deeper love. Even death, the final terror, reveals itself as transformation rather than annihilation, a return to the source from which you came. This is not wishful thinking. It is a psychological truth. The psyche has always known that death is not the end. That is why myths of death and rebirth appear in every culture, why dreams of transformation emerge in every age. They are the soul's way of telling us that nothing essential is ever lost. To live from this place is to live mythically. It is to see your life not as a random series of events, but as a story written not only by you, but through you. It is to understand that you are both the protagonist and the vessel, both the actor and the stage. And when you live this way, even the smallest moments shimmer with significance. A conversation becomes an oracle. A dream becomes a prophecy. A chance encounter becomes a turning point. Synchronicity, Jung's term for meaningful coincidence, becomes the language of the self, guiding you with subtle precision. But the sacred path is not without danger. The numinous can heal, but it can also overwhelm. The ego, dazzled by its proximity to the divine, may inflate, imagining itself chosen or special. Jung warned that spiritual inflation is one of the greatest dangers of individuation. The task is not to identify with the self, but to serve it, to remain humble before the mystery, to remember that the ocean flows through you but is not yours. Humility does not mean diminishment. It means alignment. It means recognizing that your life is not just about personal gratification, but about participating in something larger, the unfolding of consciousness itself. It means asking not what do I want, but what wants to move through me. It means offering your talents, your wounds, your very being to the work of becoming, and that work never ends. Individuation is not a destination, but a way of living, a continuous dance between consciousness and unconsciousness, between form and mystery, between the known and the infinite unknown. The deeper you go, the more vast the self reveals itself to be. Each integration opens a new horizon. Each realization births new questions. The journey is endless because the self is inexhaustible, and yet, even as the mystery expands, something paradoxical occurs. The more deeply you connect with the self, the more fully you inhabit your human life. The spiritual does not pull you away from the world. It roots you more deeply in it. Love becomes more tender. Beauty becomes more vivid. Suffering becomes more bearable. You begin to see the sacred in the ordinary, in a stranger's smile, in the wind through the trees, in the rise and fall of your own breath. The transcendent is not elsewhere. It is here, woven into the fabric of your daily life. This is the final gift of Jungian therapy. It does not lead you out of life, but deeper into it. It does not offer escape from the world, but a more intimate participation in its mystery. It does not promise perfection, but wholeness, a wholeness that includes your light and your shadow, your joy and your pain, your divinity and your humanity. And perhaps this is the deepest paradox of all, that the path you thought would lead you away from yourself, into archetypes and symbols, into dreams and gods, leads you home. That the journey outward is the journey inward. That the one you have been seeking is the one who has been seeking all along. The self has always been here, waiting, watching, guiding you through every loss, every longing, every mistake. It speaks in whispers, in symbols, in the ache of your soul. And if you listen, truly listen, it will lead you back to the center of your being, where you were never separate, where you were never incomplete, where you have always been whole. You began this journey searching for answers. Perhaps you came because of a wound you could not heal, a question you could not silence, a feeling you could not escape. Jungian psychology does not offer easy solutions to those things. What it offers instead is a path, not away from your suffering, but through it, not out of your darkness, but deeper into it, until you find the light that lives there too. The ego wanted certainty. The psyche offered a mystery. The ego wanted control. The self offered surrender. The ego wanted to be good. The shadow demanded to be whole. And somewhere along the way, you discovered that wholeness is not the absence of darkness, but the integration of it. That healing is not about erasing wounds, but transforming them into sources of wisdom. That meaning is not something you find, but something that unfolds as you live into your depths. Jungian therapy is not a technique or a set of tools. It is a way of relating to yourself, with curiosity, with courage, with radical honesty. It is a willingness to explore the forgotten corners of your soul, to listen to your dreams, to wrestle with your archetypes, to embrace your shadow, and to surrender to the mystery that lives within you. It is the art of becoming what you always were, a whole, living, evolving self. And if you choose to walk this path, it will change you. It will strip away illusions. It will challenge everything you think you know. It will humble you, break you, and remake you. But it will also bring you home. Home to your own depths. Home to your own truth. Home to the vast and sacred mystery of being alive. The path of individuation is not for the faint of heart. But if you are willing to walk it, if you are willing to face yourself completely, then what awaits on the other side is nothing less than your soul, not as an abstract concept, but as a living presence that breathes and speaks and longs through you.